Good morning. How are we this morning? If y'all move to the sides move to the middle, this would be a big old crowd on first service. It'd be great. Good to see you this morning. Got any kiddo? Nope, kiddos this morning. Cool, all right. Well, good to see you this morning. We're glad you're here. If you missed last week, we started a new series entitled Mindset. Last week, we introduced the idea of, is mental health important? Part of that conversation, I just share with you, I normally am fairly honest, I think. But last week I had several comments, people that were watching online, people that were here. I had comments like, I've never heard mental health talked about in a church before. That was interesting. I had just a lot of people that were either struggling or new people that had struggled and really needed to hear a little bit of what was shared last week. If you remember my illustration that I shared with you, that sometimes when I'm in the car I sing to myself, and last week when the sunrise came up I was singing Cotton Candy, Cotton Candy. I even got a couple of text messages this week that said Cotton Candy, Cotton Candy. So there you go. I won't tell you what I was singing this morning on the way in. It was different, but it was good. So we're in week 2. The reason I'm holding this card, there's still cards out in the lobby if you want to invite people to come be a part of this. We've still got about 3 or 4 weeks left in the series, and just giving you the idea of where we're going and the track that we're taking for this. This morning, I want to share with you, it's going to be a particular story that you may or may not be familiar with. I think if you've been around church for a while, you'll probably be familiar with the setting and the story. But here's where I want to sort of ask a question. It's on the card if you've already looked ahead. And I want you to see this. Here's where I think a lot of us find ourselves. It'll put it up on the screen for me. Of course, you can always follow along by hitting that QR code, and you'll see the sermon notes, or you can follow along this way. Here it is. I am exhausted and at the point of burnout. What do I do? What do I do? Okay, so with the people that are in here, I won't see you if you're online and you raise your hand, but for the people that are in here, how many of you have ever felt exhaustion in your life? Exhaustion. Okay, just exhausted. Life is, you can put your hands down, life has just worn you down, beat you down. You felt as if there's not another step. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. It can be caused by a million different things, but you have felt that before. So you raised your hands. Here's the second one. How many of you have ever felt, okay, I want to be very careful because the definition of what burnout is, I'll share with you in a second. But how many of you have ever felt like you're at the point of being just burnt out? You ever felt that way? Cool. It's a good number of you, okay? Let me see if I can give you a little bit, it's not scientific, but it's a little bit of information with some research that I did about the difference between being exhausted and being burnt out, or being stressed and being burnt out. The idea of being stressed is, welcome to life, all right? We all go through seasons and times and events and emotions and areas of our life where stress is high. When you were in school, stress was high when the 8th grade dance was coming around. Stress was high when you weren't sure if you were going to get asked to prom or if you actually had to ask someone to go to prom. Stresses were there. Stresses were, am I going to pass this test? Am I going to graduate? Are my parents going to beat me up for not turning in a year and a half's worth of homework? Whatever it may be, the stresses. And then as you move through high school and into maybe college, maybe a career field, whatever it may be, stresses will wane. Stresses will come and go. And there will be times and seasons that you're a little stressed. So that is stress. The kind of the definition that kind of moves past that of burnout is when the stress does not end. When stress builds on top of stress, builds on top of stress, and there is an extended period of time to where you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And if you do see the light at the end of the tunnel, you recognize pretty quickly it's a flipping train coming at you. That is more of a definition of burnout. So I want you to kind of know the difference, because I've heard a lot of people, and I know in today's world, people, especially in church world, they will say, man, I can't volunteer anymore. I'm just burnt out with church. No, you're not. You burn out with the rest of life. Church should be burnt out with church. Amen? All right, I got 4 of you. That's good. All right. We need volunteers in case. No, I'm teasing. But no, it's just this idea that sometimes we get caught in catchphrases, and we could be going through a season of stress, and you immediately go to, well, I'm just burnt out. I need to quit everything. And that may not be the case. You may just be going through a season of stress. Let me share with you. I've been through this before. I don't know. I don't think I've necessarily fit the definition of burnout, but I have been close before. I remember several years ago going through a season while ministering here at Living Water. Part of ministry is you go through difficult seasons and changes and things that go on, and I'd kind of fought through some of those, and then there was another change going on, and I just kind of hit a wall is what it felt like in my mind. In my listen, I was still doing my quiet time every day. I was reading, I was praying, I was serving, I was doing everything I was supposed to. I just kind of felt like, man, there was something there. So I went to our elders, I went to our staff and said, I need to take a break for just a little while. I was granted that. I took a little bit of a break. And what I discovered is very early on in that break, I was actually dealing with some depression as well. So I began talking to a counselor, began walking through some of that. But what I found myself, and my wife will remember it really well because I'm sure she wanted to pop me a couple of times. There was several mornings that I would get up, I would eat breakfast, and I would grab 2 or 3 books, and I would go down in my backyard, and I had a hammock between trees, and I would just lay in that hammock for 3 or 4 hours and read and try to take a nap and read, and it's nothing wrong with that. How many of y'all like hammocks and books? Amen? All right, cool, that's good stuff. But for me, it was just driving me further and further, and beginning to recognize that. So God helped me take some steps, and I'll share some of those through some of the message this morning, but I think I was close. I think I was close to being there. And my most pressing question in the middle of that was, do I need to do this anymore? Should I do this anymore? And can I do this anymore? Which I've discovered with some research seem to be the questions when you're heading toward that. For me, God gave me the opportunity through counsel, through walking, through getting re-energized to step back in, and I'm more excited today than I've ever been about the opportunities. I also realized I can't do it by myself, so that helps out a whole lot too. So let me dig into this message this morning. I want to talk about a particular character, a guy by the name of Elijah. Everybody say Elijah, if you will. Cool. Do y'all know who Elijah is? There is Elijah and there is Elisha. Elisha was Elijah's understudy. Elijah has a ministry that is recorded in the book of 1 Kings, and there's little parts of it in a couple other books, but the books of 1 and 2 Kings are, this is going to be really, really cool. You're going to learn a lot. You ready? They are books about the kings of Israel. Isn't that cool? That's good. See how y'all just learned something right there? So Elijah comes on the scene. Now, Elijah is somebody we can definitively say was heading toward burnout and probably could have been done and almost ended his life because of where he was. He had gone through 3+ years of just exhaustive work. We pick it up, and I'm going to share with you again. I've got several scriptures, but I'm going to mainly be in 1 Kings this morning. And we can see this when Elijah appears on the scene. Ahab is the king of Israel. Ahab was one of the most wicked kings that Israel ever had. It actually recorded in 1 Kings 16. It says, Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. They pretty well defined he was an evil king. Verse 33 says, he did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all of the kings of Israel before him. Pretty bad dude as a king. Now, let's just top off the fact that you are the most wicked king that Israel has ever seen. Ahab chose for himself a wife by the name of Jezebel. Y'all familiar with that name? Now, Ahab was wicked, and Jezebel was wicked squared, all right? she took it to a whole nother level. She hated God. She hated anybody that represented God. They began to set up altars to Baal and to other gods. And the country, the nation itself, was beginning to just turn its entire back on God. God told Elijah, our character that we're going to talk about today, to go before Ahab and Jezebel and to tell them that God was going to shut down the rain from heaven for a period of 3 years. There was going to be no rain. Well, in that dry desert environment of the Middle East, with no rain, that meant that there was going to be a drought and a famine. That meant that the cows couldn't eat, the goats couldn't eat, the sheep couldn't eat, you couldn't grow plants. In other words, the nation of Israel was going to go into a very famine season. So, for 3 years, no rain whatsoever. At the end of that 3 years, God spoke to Elijah and he said, you need to tell Ahab it's going to rain. But before, we're going to have this showdown, the showdown of showdowns up on Mount Carmel. I mentioned that a little bit last week. And as they went up to Mount Carmel, you know, Elijah and the 450 prophets of Baal, they're going against each other. And Elijah's starting to taunt them and say, you know, maybe your God's gone to the bathroom or he's asleep or whatever it may be. And ultimately, Elijah calls down God and says, burn up the altar, and God shoots fire down from heaven, and it's just a crazy, crazy story. So, all this is going on in Elijah's life. After Mount Carmel, after this situation had occurred and the exhaustion of all of this last 3 years of ministry, we find another little interesting thing in the story I wanted to share with you. In 1 Kings 18, it says, after this, so Elijah said, go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. In other words, God had told Elijah it's going to rain. Elijah sent his servant to Ahab and said, go tell him. Verse 45 is really kind of crazy. Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose. A heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off toward Jezreel. Jezreel is south of Mount Carmel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, remember they wore robes, so that outer garment, tucking that into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. So 3 years of exhaustion, 3 years of ministry, of drought and famine, living and being fed by a widow with one son, and oil that didn't run out, and all the stories around Elijah. At the end of all that, God told Elijah to run a marathon. A marathon is 26.2 miles. Elijah ran 25 miles down to Jezreel, and he ran it so fast that he outran the king's chariot. Can you imagine being the king riding along in your chariot and the cartoon character Elijah's just zipping past you, arms and legs like the Roadrunner? Did he turn and go beep, beep, and keep on going? Well, I just aged myself. I said the Roadrunner. Wasn't that good? He's running all the way down. Would y'all say that Elijah was exhausted and at the point of burnout? Would y'all say that? I think I would too. So let's pick up the story. 1 Kings 19. Just add another little layer. Now Ahab told Jezebel, when you got to go home and tell your wife, I can't believe they did that to me. You might be a problem as a leader, all right? Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed the prophets with a sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not take your life like one of them. So for good measure, the most powerful person in the entire country, the wife of the king, has just taken out a contract on your life. Elijah did exactly what you and I would probably do in that situation. He said, I'm done. Psychologists and researchers, and a little bit of research that I did this week digging into this, they tell us how we show signs of burnout in our lives. So they're going to put those up on the screen for you, and I'll give just a little bit, and then we'll get back into the story. Psychologists and researchers tell us that the signs of burnout come in 3 different ways. They come physically, they come mentally, and they come emotionally. So let me give you these, all right? Physically, a sign of burnout is you are easily fatigued, You have low energy. You have difficult sleeping. You have headaches. You have body aches. You have muscle pain. The way that a lot of people cope with this is they change their eating habits. They decide that more Big Macs will help this, or they quit eating altogether. They begin to abuse alcohol. They take prescription pain medicines to an abundance, and they take drugs. They say that physically I am completely burnt out. I'm hurting all over, so this is what I'm going to do. So that's physically. Mentally is an ongoing stress actually impacts our brains. Did y'all know that? Ongoing stress. Our brains are crazy things. Some of y'all's crazier than others, but our brains are crazy things. They actually, when we create thought patterns in our lives, it creates canyons in our brains, kind of like the Grand Canyon. Some of you, well, you get it. All right, anyway, I won't make any more jokes. So all those thought patterns begin to go through our minds, and mentally, when we are exhausted and stressed and we're heading toward burnout, the thought processes and the wavelengths in our brain, they begin to hit these sort of walls. It begins to kick in our responses, like our fight and our flight. It creates fear inside of us. We feel desperate. It weakens our brain and weakens our ability to remember and to think. It messes with our decision making. We're indecisive. We have a loss of memory, and we have difficulty focusing. Emotionally is just a loss of motivation, a chronic feeling of self-doubt, of failure, of being alone, and generally just miserable, decreased satisfaction in just about everything. The crazy thing is, emotionally, a lot of people that are heading this way, they cope with it by thinking that change will help. I'll change my job. I'll change my marriage. I'll change my life. I'll change everything. And what they discover is more emotional exhaustion. So that may describe Elijah very, very well. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. Oh, and I ran a little marathon too. Let me get back to the story. In 1 Kings there in 19 verse 3. This is how Elijah responded. Elijah says this. It says, Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Let me pause there for just a second. I know a lot of us don't just know the geography of the Middle East and of Israel. So what this is basically saying, when he came to Beersheba in Judah, that is the furthest away that he could possibly be from the king. He went all the way through Judah and Israel, all the way as far south as he could possibly be. And at that point is when he left his servant and went on as far as he could go. He came to a broom bush. He sat down under it and he prayed that he might die. He said this, he said, I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. And then he lay down under the bush and he fell asleep. I'm going to get a couple of things that are going to come up on the screen, and it's referencing these verses right here that we just read. So hopefully you remember these as I go through, and you'll see some of these things in Elijah, and maybe you'll recognize them in yourself if you're getting close to this. So let me point them out to you, okay? First thing is this, his fight. Remember, Elijah was quite the fighter. He stood off 450 prophets of Baal. He stood before the king and before the queen. His fight turned into flight. His instincts, his gifting, the way that God had put inside of him to say, stand before the people, stand and say, thus saith the Lord, stand and do this stuff, it had turned to flight. And that led to complete exhaustion. And we can see that when it says Elijah was afraid and he ran for his life. The second thing is this, he isolated himself and he went out on his own. He had this one servant that was faithful to him all throughout his life, and when he had come to a point that he said, I can't do this anymore, he completely isolated himself from everyone and said, I'm going out on my own, I can't do this anymore. That is not a good move when you're struggling with this. The third thing is he gave up. He gave up and he felt like a failure. He said, Lord, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. And then the last thing is this, he began to compare himself to others. And this comparing themselves to others, I think a lot of people, they find themselves there. See, I think comparison is one of the biggest things that it causes us to dig in further into that stress and exhaustion and burnout. Because we live in a world of comparison, don't we? Don't we? We look, it used to be when I was a kid, everybody would say, keep up with the Joneses. The Joneses were your hypothetical neighbors. We're going to keep up with them. The problem is, the Joneses is now expanded to everyone in the world who carries one of these. Because the Joneses are on every social media network, and they keep creating new social media networks so people can get connected and keep all these things. And we compare ourselves to everything. I've seen it over and over in years of ministry and just years of being alive. People will find themselves in a place that they're stressed and they're exhausted, and they don't even recognize that part of this stress and exhaustion they're doing to themselves. Because they're constantly comparing. I see it in young couples in the church world, in the world outside. They say, well, so-and-so has their kid in this sport and this sport and this sport. And if I don't have my kid in this sport and this dance and this thing and this thing and this thing, and I don't get them all involved in this, then my kids, they're going to miss out on life. And people will get so exhausted that they'll just go, gosh, I just need a break and I can't do this anymore. Well, who told you got to have your kids in everything in the world? Listen, little secret. This is going to be hard on some of you mamas and daddies that have softball is life on your shirt. And, listen, if I'm picking on you, feel picked on, all right? But I just need to share with you, okay? You're probably not raising a professional athlete. Okay? Do y'all know that? That 27 extra hours in the batting cage will probably not bring about your mortgage being paid off because your kid's probably not going to be there. All right? Maybe they will, but then they're probably going to resent you because you couldn't just throw the ball. You had to stick them in a batting cage for 27 hours. But people begin to compare themselves. They look at houses and cars and boats and jet skis and motorcycles and everything else in the world. And really a lot of this burnout and exhaustion that people call burnout and exhaustion is because we're doing it to ourselves. I remember hearing a statement years ago, and I repeat it every once in a while. Someone who kills themselves can't claim they're a martyr. If you're doing it to yourself, you're not burning out, you're burning yourself out. So this is the biblical advice. Stop it. There you go. God bless you. Go home. All right? No. Let me, again, I could probably wonder forever, but I won't. Verse 5. All at once, an angel touched him. Well, that'd be cool. An angel touched him and said, get up and eat. That'd be really cool. Angel food. This is the first angel food cake. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate, he drank, and then he lay down again, which kind of helps me understand something, that God will always provide for you. God is always there. When you're in the middle of burnout, when you're in the middle of exhaustion, God will always provide. He's always there. He's always ready to help. But, well, let me put it up on the screen. God provides, but we have to take the steps. I think I said it last week. Pray like everything depends on God and work like everything depends on you. Take the steps. God's there. I mean, if he makes you angel food cake, then eat it. But Elijah, he ate, he drank, and he slept. And so many times we miss the fact that God is providing. God has people all around us. One of the things that we talk about a lot in our church with life groups and being connected is so that you can get people around you to help you walk through the difficulties of life so you don't reach this point of burnout and you feel like you're all on your own. So the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. I imagine Elijah going, journey? I got to go somewhere again? The journey's too much for you. So he got up, he ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled another 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb. Horeb, by the way, is the mountain of God. That is the same mountain where Moses received the 10 Commandments. The people gathered around. They heard from God. And it says in Elijah's case, there he went into a cave and he spent the night. My little geeky self decided to pull up a map and track it out and see what it is. From where he was in Jezreel or Beersheba down to Mount Horeb is another 200 miles. And Elijah didn't take an Uber or a flight. Allegiant wasn't doing special rates from Beersheba to Mount Horeb. He walked, and he spent 40 days walking and going that way. A lot of people compare Elijah to Moses and the children of Israel wandering for 40 years, and Elijah wandered for 40 days. But at this point, Elijah is pretty exhausted. And I think it's right here. I think that we can find some of the ordinary steps in Elijah's life that helped him recognize and reach for God in the middle of his exhaustion and his burnout. Look at this. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah. The word of the Lord came to him and said this. What are you doing here, Elijah? Now listen, God wasn't looking for him. God wasn't like, where are you hiding, Elijah? Ready or not, here I come. God knew exactly where he was. But what God knew and what God recognized about Elijah was this. Elijah needed to talk. Can I share something with you throughout this entire series that we are doing on mindset? If you try to walk through anything in your life by yourself, you're probably going to fall. I think I can back that up with Scripture. I can back it up with life experience. You need to talk to people. Some of you need to stop oversharing, but some of you just need to talk, okay? Because you see, what Elijah needed more than anything else is he needed God to hear his emotions and hear what he was thinking and what he was feeling. Because when we express our emotions, we have the ability to be able to speak what our hurts and what our thoughts are. And do you know that sometimes your emotions will betray you? Did y'all know that about yourself? Did you know that sometimes you can think something bad is happening when something bad is not really happening? And because your emotions are out of whack, you can convince yourself that the bad is really happening when there's really not bad that's happening? Did y'all know that? Anybody ever experienced that in your life? Anybody have somebody that walks with you that goes, stop, that's not reality? Reality is one thing, but what I've learned over the years is I cannot invalidate someone's emotions. See, Elijah was in a place where his emotions were shot. And God didn't try to invalidate his emotions. God didn't say, well, Elijah, here's the facts. He's going to give him the facts in a minute, but that wasn't God's point with Elijah. God was saying to Elijah, tell me what you're doing here, buddy. I need you to talk. I need you to let me know what's going on. So Elijah responded in verse 10. It says he replied, God, I've been very, very zealous for you. For the Lord God Almighty, the Israelites have rejected your covenant. I'm supposed to be representing you. They've rejected your covenant. They've torn down your altars and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me too. That's how Elijah felt. That was his emotions. That's what was going on inside of him. He felt all alone. He felt deserted. He felt like he was by himself. And Elijah needed to talk. So I'm going to share with you that if you are walking through difficult exhaustion in your life that is heading toward a potential burnout in your life, I would say to you, you need to talk to someone. Could that be a pastor? Sure it could. Kyle's taking appointments every single day. You can come and see him. All right, I was just checking, all right? Yeah, my calendar's full right now, but Kyle has a few openings I saw the other day on his calendar. No, I'm kidding. No, we're here. We're available to talk to, and I'm teasing. We love the opportunity to be able to help. But you know what? Sometimes you come to us and you begin to talk to us, and we're like, you know what? We have somebody we're going to recommend, and we're going to send you somewhere else. I do know where my limits are, and my limits are there, okay? So we'll be able to help you, but you got to talk to somebody. So that's first. We kind of see that in there. The second thing is this. Elijah needed a reminder of who's in charge. So God responds, the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord. For the Lord is about to pass by. If you are ever in a place of exhaustion and tiredness and burnoutness and you hear the voice of God say, go outside, I'm going to pass by, you should probably hold off just a second, all right? But in Elijah's case, he was used to speaking to God and hearing from God. So when God said, Elijah, get up out of the cave and go outside because you're about to experience my presence, Elijah needed a reminder of who's in charge. And I've seen so many people over the years that will get in these places of exhaustion and burnout and get down, and they'll actually forget that God is still in charge of their lives. That God is still the one who is moving them through a journey and taking them down a path. And so often people will say, well, if I don't do this and if I don't do that, when in reality, God is still working in your life. God is still doing things. He can still walk with you through the exhaustion, through the burnout, and take you through it and have you continue to walk with Him. And sometimes we just I need a reminder. The next thing that I see in this is this. Elijah needed to know that God was close. Man, this really spoke to my heart this week. Let me read it to you. If you're familiar with this, you'll catch it, all right? Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountain apart, shattered the rocks before the Lord. That's kind of what I visualize if God's going to walk by. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. That's sort of interesting to me. I feel like God could use any one of those things to get my attention. But I love this. See, Elijah needed to know that God was close. So look at this. After the fire came a gentle whisper. I grew up with the King James Version of the Bible, and it said, a still small voice, which is cool. A gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face, and he went outside, and he stood at the mouth of the cave. In Elijah's case, the extraordinary was not what Elijah needed. Now remember, this is Elijah who had, again, called down fire from heaven. This widow that he stayed with during the drought, she was the one who, when he came and he said, will you make me a cake with a little bit of oil? She said, I've only got enough oil to feed myself and my son, and we're going to eat it and we're going to die. And Elijah said, trust me and trust God. And this is the widow who went back, and every single time she needed oil, there was always oil in the bottom, and God continued to do miracles, miracle after miracle in Elijah's life. This is Elijah who had experienced all the extraordinary things that God could show in his life. But what he needed more than anything in this moment was he needed to know that God was close. And if you're experiencing exhaustion and to the point of burnout, you need to know God is close. I love the fact that God whispers. Did you know you only whisper when you know somebody's close enough to hear you? Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? It's the same question God had answered before. He replied, God, I've been very zealous for the Lord Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars and put your prophets to death with the sword. And then he says this, he said, I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. Elijah felt alone. He felt like he couldn't do this anymore. And as God whispered to him, Elijah needed to know one more thing. Elijah needed to know that he was not alone. He was not alone as he went back to serving God. It says in verse 15, the Lord said to him, go back the way you came, Elijah. Go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel. Anoint Elisha, the son of Shaphat from Abel Maholah, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any of those who escaped the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escaped the sword of Jehu. And then verse 18, yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel. I wonder if God whispered that. I wonder if God whispered, hey, Elijah, you're not alone. I know you're tired. I know you're exhausted. If anybody who's served me is at a place of burnout, I know it's you, Elijah. But hey, buddy, you're not alone. There's 7,000 in Israel who haven't bowed down their knee to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him. I think the thing that encourages me through this story is that so often, I can speak for myself. When I was in the middle of depression and feeling like I was done, not knowing if I was supposed to continue, I remember talking to Missy and praying with Missy through some of this and going, man, I just wish God would show me something. I just wish God would show me something. I wish God would tell me. I would ask people in my life, what do you think God's doing? And nobody was really giving me anything clear. Because I kept looking for the extraordinary. Oh man, I would have welcomed an earthquake. Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if God goes, I need you to go here. See, there's the path. Or if God went, hey, I'm going to send some fire and I'm going to burn down every obstacle in your life so you'll know which way to go. Well, that'd be cool. I was looking for that. God, if you'll give me the definitives, if you'll give me the do this, don't do that, take this step, move forward, everything will be cool. That's what I was looking for, the extraordinary. But what I discovered, and what you'll discover to this story of Elijah, and what you'll discover if you go to God with every time you're struggling with your mental health, with this idea of burnout and exhaustion, is this. And put it up on the screen for me. All right? God is in the extraordinary. There is no doubt God is in the extraordinary. God does extraordinary things every single day. But God is more often in the ordinary. Do you know why? Watch this. They're going to put it on the screen for me. Watch this. This is why. Because he whispers when he's close. He whispers when he's close. I don't know where your struggle is. I don't know what your line is. I can tell you this, if you feel like you're reaching it, don't stop. Maybe you need to rest. Maybe you need to change your eating habits. Maybe you need to exercise. Maybe God is changing your career field, your job, whatever. I don't know I can't give you those answers. If I had a crystal ball, I'd rub it and tell you exactly what you needed to do. But I don't. What I know this is every single time that I've needed to hear the whisper of God, I just got closer and I could hear him. In Matthew chapter 11, Jesus is actually speaking to the disciples and to people that are exhausted and are at the point of burnout. And he says this, I need you to recognize this for all of time. Not just for the disciples, not just for the people in the first century, but for all of time. Jesus says these words, come to me. Come to me. All of you who are weary and burdened. If Jesus would have elaborated, come to me. All of you who are tired, all of you who are grieving, all of you who are hurting, all of you that have had things in your life that you don't understand, all of you that are questioning the circumstances of life, all of you that feel the weariness and the burden of life, come to me. And then I love his promise, and he says, I'll give you rest. So my question as I kind of close out is, what do you need to do to draw close to Jesus? What do you need to do to get that rest? Again, I'm probably not going to give you step A, step B, step C throughout this series. What I am going to do is tell you that you're the one that can take the step. You do what you need to do and let God do what only he can do. And God's there. He wants to whisper to you. But you got to get close enough to hear the whisper. I don't know what that looks like in your life. If you're somebody who's never taken the first step of following Jesus, you'll never trust him with exhaustion and burnout until you trust him with your life. Maybe that's your first step. Maybe you need to look at your schedule. Is there something that needs to change? And please don't be mad at me if you're somebody who has your kid in sports. Sports is great. My kids played organized sports, and we went to our Saturdays were spent at soccer fields. We did this stuff. We did, but we never, ever, ever said, we're going to do this, but, if we're going to have to take a break, we're going to take a break on Sundays, and we're not going to go to church. No, we just didn't do that because God was always a priority in all of our values. But I'm trying not to pick on you, and I'm not really picking on you, but maybe your kids don't have to be in everything. I know that's a crazy option, but maybe. Maybe something in your schedule needs to change so that your kids can be involved. That's fine. Have them involved. Maybe something in your work schedule that you can control, something you can change. Maybe you need to change your eating habits. Maybe you need to change the fact that you haven't walked more than a quarter of a mile in the last 20 years of your life. Maybe you haven't bought a pair of tennis shoes in I don't know how long because your feet are so messed up because you don't walk. I'm picking. I'll stop. All right? Maybe it's a bunch of different things. But you know what you can choose? You can choose that first step. Every single time you can choose that first step. You're the one that can say, hey, God, I need to hear you whisper. And in order to hear you whisper, I got to get close. I got to get close. So what's that look like for you? I am at the point of exhaustion and burnout. What do? I get close. That's what I do. Let me pray. Jesus, I love you. Thank you for your words today. Thank you for clarity. Thank you that, God, we have something we need to do. This isn't us just sitting back and going, all right, God, I admit it, I'm not going to do anything. No. God, we've got steps we need to take. We've got to move in a direction towards you. So give us wisdom. Help us to trust you in everything we do and to move towards you. where we can hear your whisper. We love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.